Welcome to What the Flick, everybody. Grace, Alonso, and Ben, Season 2, Episode 2, Insurgent of UnREAL. And good stuff. Grace, as we were starting there on Facebook Live, you were talking about sort of the
backstabbing.
Web. Right.
We're getting into it. We're seeing Rachel, you know, I think we were all a little nervous seeing how close Rachel, how forgiving Rachel was of Quinn in the first episode of Season 2. And I think now we're seeing Rachel's taken some of that power back.
Obviously in a way that manages to blow up in her face anyway, because, you know, the network is always the worst.
But you know, like you can't, like when Rachel goes to the head of the network to say that Craig Bierko and Constance Zimmer are fighting, Chet and Quinn are fighting.
Mommy and Daddy.
Mommy and Daddy are fighting, right? And I'm the grown-up who needs to save this situation. Like, you know that is not going to work.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
And it probably shouldn't work. It's not just TV not going to work. Like, again, why would that guy trust you?
Right,
You know,
you're the crazy one.
Right, you're the crazy one, and you're literally not being part of the team. You have literally gone over everybody's.
It's true.
So I mean, and then so his decision to come in and bring in a third guy, and that again, that felt like totally making fun of new media, but effectively because the guy who comes in to be the EP is the head of something called
like
Blast.
Splash or Fizzle or something.
No, I think it's called Blast. That's why they were saying Everblasting.
No. Everblasting was the title that Chet was using in his
For
promo.
the show.
Oh,
For
that's
the
right.
show. It was, it's something called like Sploozle or something. I forgot what.
Sploozle.
Yeah, I mean, you know, obviously Lifetime, traditionally Lifetime television for women. The men on this show are kind of taking a hit here, but I will say that on the one hand, the female characters are also interesting and fucked up and making big mistakes. And also, like Chet, as the guy who took credit for the show without actually creating the show, clearly doesn't get the show. Because as Quinn always says, and is totally right, we are selling romance
Selling
here.
a fairy tale.
Selling a fairy tale. It is complete and utter bullshit, but she knows exactly the brand of bullshit that America wants, and that has made the show a hit. And Chet wants to turn it into something else.
Chet wants to turn it into Tila Tequila, A Shot of Love. So you have The Bachelor about romance, and then while The Bachelor was on early on, you had MTV's version of that sort of thing, which was just the raunchy sex romp.
I mean, who does Chet think is watching this show? Like,
he doesn't understand the audience, and I think that they did a good job of showing how out of touch he really is with the show that he claimed falsely that he created.
And Quinn's point about sort of selling romance, like it's ironic here on Lifetime, which is now successfully moved from television for women. But The Bachelor, that's what it is. They are selling this idea of romance. Obviously, men watch The Bachelor, but it is designed to make, the idea is that women will be like, it can happen.
And speaking of selling romance, they really do go after the Chris Harrison type character in this particular episode, you know, as this guy that really does believe that he is the one responsible for making everlasting, you know, for what does he say? Like I'm selling love, or I've reintroduced love to a love-starved nation, or something like that. This self-absorbed, self-involved host.
You know, at the end of they cut
please stop talking.
They cut the first scene, you know, and after he does the welcome, all he does is welcome people and hand out roses. I mean, it's you watch The Bachelor, and like Chris Harrison is the greatest job in the world.
Well, but then there's those reunion episodes where shit gets real.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Very challenging. But then, so we see the Chris Harrison, Graham, I think is his name. So we see him go, all right, ladies, party in my room, right? And instantly just cut to Quinn, who's like, yeah, somebody shut down that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's great. So skewering him is fun, right?
The racial politics are...
Oh, that was so good and handled like deftly. So we get the girl from the South, and they... You know, at some point, everyone would realize that everyone is manipulating them. So I liked Darius Beck's friend saying, you know, when don't you see Chet's manipulating you? And he goes... Everybody's manipulating everybody. That's what's happening here. So he's actually he figured it out. It took him seconds to figure it out. But they manipulate that poor girl into
wearing the bikini,
wearing the Confederate flag bikini when there's a black suitor.
Yep.
Right. But then they handle it effectively. Like, you know, then all of a sudden where you'd expect Darius to storm off or whatever, just anything they you know, then he's sort of sweet about it.
Well, and even the other women, like they're all sort of horrified. But the thing is, you know, you imagine like the bullshit TV version of this is people getting super mad and confrontational, blah blah blah.
Cat fight breaks out.
Exactly.
People
And the
dive
real
in
thing,
the
everybody's
pool.
gonna like, oh my, are you gonna say something? Is
Yeah.
she gonna, are we gonna? Oh, what the hell?
But how about
you know?
the way the girl way they wrote the girl handling it?
Yes.
Like is so nice. She's like, yeah, look, I'm proud of where I'm from, but I'm not trying to be rude. I didn't want to offend you. I idolize you, and I'm so sorry, and I want you to like me. And this was rude, and I'm so sorry. Like that's not what a racist is supposed to say.
Well, especially when she's having that conversation with Rachel, where she's like, I'm actually a big fan of his. Like, I love him. We watch his games every Sunday.
Right.
And Rachel just goes, wow, racism is complicated, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but I mean that's a speech that John Turturro has in Do the Right Thing about how like Michael Jackson and Prince and Michael Jordan aren't, you know, black people because they're, you know, they're great at what they do or whatever. Yeah, this is touching on so much stuff. And then you've got Jay now coming in. You know, for the college student, you know, and basically telling him, well, stop listening to Rachel because she's playing you, and then he's playing her as well for his own purposes and for the show's purposes.
Right, it's no different.
You know?
He feels bad. Rachel feels bad when they do it sometimes. Yeah, but then again, you know, but look at the show. The show managed to effectively get a girl wearing a Confederate flag bikini and another girl wearing a T-shirt that says,
I can't
breathe. Like, you know, right? Like,
Whoa.
Like, it's right. The show was... And then, you know, Rachel, who'd been bailed out so many times by Josh Kelly, by Jeremy, you know, and then she's again crushed and alone and sad and wondering whether she should medicate herself, wondering whether her mom her mom, the therapist, is over medicating her, wondering whether Quinn has betrayed her and is secretly
who's talking to her mother.
Who's talking to her mother. And then you see Jeremy, who's bailed her out so many times, and he comes, he's like, "You okay?" And she's like, "Yeah." And then he's like, "Yeah, because we got to move the set." Like he is, you know,
over it.
He's
Yeah.
so over
So
her.
done.
Yeah. It's,
Now, okay, this is one of those things where, you know, I've called into question just the mechanics of how television works versus how
you made a great
this
point last
show
week, yeah.
works. Well, no, so my question is, and y'all would know this better than me, do we believe in the idea of two separate executive producers shooting two separate versions of the show at the same time?
inconceivable.
Yeah, that just budgetarily and all
Right.
the other things just didn't play for me.
Well, also, you know, as very recently, I've been a PA on a Lifetime show, on a reality Lifetime show, and just this episode really stressed me out because I went back into my PA brain of like, who would I follow if someone's like, go there, do that? I mean, it would be an absolute disaster. But I thought it was a little bit strange that they ran with it for a whole episode, that they were both shooting and kind of, you know, thwarting each other over the walkies. That didn't really hold up, but I liked it to create the power dynamic that they needed to.
And at least they crushed it at the end of this episode.
Yes.
Like,
Oh, yeah.
Like they recognized that, no, we're going to pick one. Although, again, that new guy who came in, Patrick Wasserman, I mean, like the greatest student, obviously, you know, you can't, if you're going to have a studio executive, name him Wasserman. It's a fair way to go. But to have that, to shut it down, but he picked Chet's version.
Yes.
Which is obviously...
Again, he doesn't get the
they
show
don't even get the show
either.
either.
Well, I think that we're going to talk a little bit about the sort of power dynamics between the sexes. That's what I feel is coming up next. We saw the preview for the third episode where Quinn says something to the effect of, they wouldn't have done this if you were a man, to Rachel, or something like that. So I think we're going to be having those really interesting conversations of how they feel they should run a show because of their male standpoint, and then the more feminine sensibility of romance and that sort of thing. That is what we're going to start seeing.
And it's interesting, this is a show created by two women, and so I'm sure their view of the trenches is a fairly accurate one in terms of you can be a woman who has great ideas and has a successful track record, but if you aren't like playing golf and doing that stuff with the execs, you don't get the same level of respect or attention paid to you or whatever, you know. And so I think that, that plays out on episodes to a certain extent. I don't know if you'll have ever watched that Showtime show.
Yeah.
You know, there's that same thing where like there's the woman who really understands how this whole thing works, but there's this series of like psychotic men that she winds up having to work for that they get to make
Right,
the
it's
decision.
right. And she is right, and then she sleeps with most of them.
Yeah, well, that too.
Right, but they're insane, and you're right, and she's the one who makes the network go.
Yeah.
And it's first got to be, and so from Quinn's point of view, and she's as to use what I presume would be their vernacular. She's tough as a man, right? She's a ball breaker, right? As tough as any 1950s guy.
I think she would appreciate that.
Right, I think she would. And even then, when she gets the big contract, even then, it still gets trumped because they play golf, and she still knows they still won't pick me.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's good stuff. It's surprisingly challenging. I'm glad they got off the multiple shoots thing. So they got race, we got sexism, they got a lot of things going on here. And they use also, because we talked about this a little last week, because some of these characters are so monstrous, they're able to use sort of racially inflammatory language and be like, hey, we're not saying it. These monsters are saying it, right?
Right.
They're pawning it off on their characters. And that lets them get away with stuff that most shows, even good shows that want to make us think, can't get away with. They've created a nice, crazy dynamic.
Yeah, I would agree. It's kind of strange that a show with so much deception sometimes is the most bitingly honest of shows on television with regards to what are people saying behind closed doors.
Right.
They go there. This is a show that will go there, no apologies. And I like that.
I think if the roles were reversed, by the way, if Chet were a woman, we'd all be like, how did Craig Bierko lose 60 pounds? But I'm curious, how did Craig Bierko lose 60 pounds?
Maybe he was just wearing a fat suit the first season.
Maybe he was. He looks great, though.
I want to know about that diet. I'll get on that.
He looks fit. All right, guys, thanks for watching. Back next week with more UnREAL. Thanks.